composer and recording artist. Please welcome Georgia Kelly.
I want to go back a little bit at the beginning of, first of all, how I heard about Mondragon, which was exactly 30 years ago. I heard about Mondragon when I was scheduling guests for Jerry Brown, our former governor's radio show in Oakland at the We the People compound that he created after he ran for president in 1992. And one time there was a guest that he scheduled that I didn't know, and that man started talking about the Mondragon cooperatives in Spain. And I thought, oh my God, this sounds like utopia. I've got to learn more about it. So when the show was over, I called the guest, talked to him for an hour, listened to what he said about Mondragon. He'd been there, I think maybe 15 years earlier. And at that time, I decided I'm going there. I don't know when, but I'm going to get there. It was actually several years later when I was organizing a conference that would take place in Dubrovnik, Croatia in 2007. And the year before, I thought, I need to get a speaker from the Mondragon cooperatives. Our theme was the economics of peace. And I thought, we have to have someone who has a really different view on economic relationships. So I called a few economists I knew because I thought somebody would have a contact there. Turns out not only did none of them have a contact, they'd never heard of the Mondragon cooperatives. So I was floored. I thought, wow, I guess there's something I need to do here since nobody knows about it. So I did manage to get through. I cold called one night at midnight. I'm a night owl, which is kind of why I was a little bit late maybe. But at midnight, I called because it was 9 o'clock in Spain, and I got through to somebody who was their educational director. And I invited him to come and speak at our conference in Dubrovnik, which he did. And when he was there, I said, could we schedule seminars where we could come and learn from you for a week? And he said, sure, why not? So we did 13 of them so far. We've had 13 week-long seminars at the Mondragon Cooperatives. And this year, in September 7th to 12th, we're doing something a little different. We're going to Mondragon, and we'll have one full day at their educational center and then sessions at the university. So I think this is going to be a very exciting time. We're going to learn more about the culture as well as the businesses. And that's kind of been my focus, is why have the Mondragon cooperatives not only existed for almost 80 years, but thrived and continue to develop and grow and create more of a rippling effect through the society. So that's one of the things I became interested in and started asking for more sessions in our groups that would deal with the cultural and political aspects of the Mondragon cooperatives. But I'm going to go back a little bit and tell you about the cooperatives, why they're so unique. In 1945, there was a priest who was sent to the parish in Mondragon. His name was Father Jose Maria Arizmendi Arieta. And for short, we call him Father Arizmendi. And when he was sent there, the Basque region of Spain was the poorest area in the country. There was 70% unemployment in Mondragon, and the entire region was really impoverished. Today, and actually probably 60 years later, which was earlier, the Basque region is the wealthiest area of Spain. So from being the most impoverished to being the wealthiest, it's not because they have billionaires. I don't think they have any. It's because there's no poverty. They've pretty much eliminated poverty. And how they do that is because there's more equity in the society, more equality in the society. And I'll explain how some of that happens. But the Mondragon cooperatives were founded by this Catholic priest. He realized when he was sent to this region that he was a highly educated man, by the way, that he had to do something to help the people there. So he started what he called a polytechnic school to train the people who were unemployed to get skills so that they could get jobs in the industrial sector in Mondragon and Bilbao, which was the major industrial city in the Basque region. So after a few years, 5 of the first graduates formed the first cooperative. This was in 1956. So in 1956 was the beginning of the Mondragon cooperatives with 5 people who made kerosene stoves. And from that, it's called Fagor, the industrial appliance division of Fagor still exists today. It's a large cooperative. I don't know how many people they employ, a couple of thousand, I think at least. And they make industrial appliances for hotels, restaurants, yeah, big things like, and they make induction stoves, they make heat pumps, they make all sorts of things. Mondragon is really an industrial cooperative. They've branched out in other areas in the last maybe 15 years, but that was their base, was really industry. So seeing that change over this amount of time and going there for the first time in 2008, which was the first time I went with our first group there, I remember I was driving with a friend who also came on that trip. And we got a car and drove from the airport to the town of Mondragon where we were staying. And I remember thinking, why these roads feel like they were just paved yesterday. They were so smooth. And of course, no billboards. Billboards are not allowed in Spain, so they're considered a distraction. So the landscape was just gorgeous. And the roads, and they still are like that. I thought there are no potholes there. I don't know what they do or what they pave their roads with, but they were just smooth all the way, the 40-minute ride from the airport to Mondragon. And of course, we've made that trip many times since now. But what sets the Mondragon cooperatives apart was the vision that Arizmendi Arrieta had at the beginning. And really, it's an astonishing look at not only the vision, but how he made it practical. And some of the areas, I mean, they have a 10 core principles of the Mondragon cooperatives. And at the center is education. And it's not just formal education, it's also education and learning about cooperatives, learning about the culture, learning about conflict resolution, learning all these areas that make you a better human in relationship to other humans. So that education is at the core. And when I first saw their 10 principles and I saw the outer ring of them, one of the outer principles was social transformation. That kind of blew my mind. I thought, they're not just looking at their business, they're looking at the whole society. And that is how they're focused. They're focused on the individual and the society and how they support each other. I'm going to give you a couple of facts about the Mondragon cooperatives, because today it comprises about 100 businesses, worker-owned businesses, and I think 80-some thousand worker owners. It fluctuates, but that's approximately what it is today. And the CEOs of these companies they can only make 6 times what the average worker makes. So like we have in the US, CEOs make 300 and 400 times the average worker, they only make 6 times. And they're all paid well. They have their own insurance. They have insurance from the Spanish government, but they also have their own pensions. Of course, as probably many of you know, Europe has a very different mode of vacations. They have 4 to 6 weeks vacation a year. It's all paid. They have sick leave. They have maternal and paternal leave for when they have children. So some of that's typical of Europe, but they have another layer on top of it through their insurance company. So the other part that's interesting, because people say, well, wouldn't a big company come in and take over Mondragon? They could just buy them out. That's impossible. The way it's been set up is it's one worker owner, one vote, one share. Shares cannot be sold. They can only be cashed out. So if you left the cooperative, you could leave with your share of whatever funds you have in the bank, but you cannot sell your share. So the shares can't be sold. And this has, I think, really prevented Mondragon from being taken over or destroyed in any manner. It was consciously set up brilliantly, and it does keep the whole structure in place. So it's very exciting to see that there was a vision that has been carried forth, and that the people, because Arizmendi died in 1979, I believe, that the whole vision has been maintained by the people who work there. And it's been amazing to me to see the changes over the years from when I first went in 2008 to October 2024, where at one time one of the industrial companies had a lot of people working on the floor. And as we got maybe 10 years after the first one, all of a sudden there were more robots on the floor. So things changed a lot. And of course, COVID changed things. And during the time of COVID, to show you kind of the esteem that the Mondragon cooperatives have in the Spanish government and in Spain, they realized, the Spanish government realized they were woefully short of masks and even for their doctors. So they contacted Mondragon because they knew Mondragon had a medical facility. They were able to make the masks, and they said, we need them yesterday. How fast can you get them? They had 10,000 out, I think, within a couple of weeks. And then it was thousands every month. So they were able to just move on it and get things going right away that helped the entire country. And that's Mondragon. Efficiency, it's incredible there. They're kind of laid back, but they're super efficient. And I think how you can be laid back and be efficient is that you cooperate. It's not up to one individual to get something done. It's a cooperating system. So people help each other. It's not a competitive environment, it's a cooperative environment. And that goes on all levels, a psychological level, business level. That's the way they work. And that's been very inspiring to me to see that a culture can create something like this and then keep it moving forward for a long period of time. Excuse me. If there's any water around here, I would be appreciative to get some. I don't know, good, someone's hearing it. Yeah, I wanted to tell you some of the things about the people there and the things we learned in our sessions. One of the first groups we brought there, and this has happened every group since then, is someone will ask, well, what happens if there's a worker who's goofing off on the job and isn't really doing what they're supposed to do? Can you fire them? Because they're a worker owner, can you fire them? And he said, oh, well, we don't have confrontations like that. We go to the person, we find out what's going on in their lives. Maybe they're going through a illness or a divorce, or there's something happening at home. We try to find out what's happening that the person's behavior has changed. It's a caring approach, not a punitive approach. Thank you. And that struck all of us very quickly, is it's not about punishing bad behavior. It's about understanding why it exists. And that was so much a part of what Mondragon is, the understanding, the caring. It's not just about our way is the right way. That's the other thing about Mondragon. They never assume they have all the answers. And for many years, they thrived under the Franco regime, sort of thrived, I should say, because they stayed under the radar. And they have this penchant for staying under the radar from those Franco years, because Arizmendi, the priest, was jailed by the Franco regime. He managed to get out, but it was dangerous because they saw the Basque region and the Mondragon cooperatives and people like that as more left-wing, which they are, most of them, but they don't have a overt political ideology, although I would say most of them are definitely lefties because of what they value. And values are an important part of the Mondragon cooperatives, how people see each other, how they relate. There's so many places that I could go right now, but I want to bring in the governing aspect because I think it's important. One of their former presidents wrote a paper called The Basque Case. And it is, when I read it, I was just floored by anyone seeing government in the light that he saw it. And some of the governing principles, because the Basque region is autonomous, it does have its own parliament. It's part of Spain, but it's also an autonomous region with a parliament of its own. And you see their values reflected in government as also in the cooperatives. So the things that one of this former president, Juan Jose Ibarrechi, said, the implementation of socio-political, legal, economic model is based on these principles of their government. The ethical principle, which includes human rights, social justice, peaceful coexistence. The democratic principle, where everyone has a vote, everyone has a voice. And the Sustainable Human Development Principle, and that considers future generations. It's like the seventh generation that we know. And the ideas that are part of that governing council, they also created a Department of Peace, which is now called the Department of Coexistence and Human Rights. And this also came out of Mondragon, because the early groups that went there, we all were going to a peace center that was in the hills above Mondragon. And the man who ran that peace center, I'm sure many of you have heard of ETA, the Basque terrorist organization that wreaked havoc on Spain for 60 years, basically. They had murdered over 1,000 people. And they were a problem. When we first went to the Basque region, we saw graffiti on the walls at the airport. We saw graffiti on the walls in the capital city, Victoria, and Bilbao. And so you knew this was still a big issue in the culture. The head of this peace department decided we need to do something about this. And he decided to bring together some of the most open-minded of the group and some of the victims and bring them together to have discussions. And it was kind of a truth and reconciliation process that he was starting. And people didn't believe anything could come of it because of the way they were working. But within a year, or I think less than a year, the ETA members who were working with this peace man decided, okay, we're not going to do any more violence. We're done with that. Nobody believed it, but nothing happened. I mean, there was no violence because they didn't give up their weapons. They figured, well, we can't give up our weapons because there might be retribution against what we've been doing for 60 years. So they didn't give up their weapons, but 6 or 7 years later, they turned in all their weaponry. They said, we don't need this anymore. We're not going to work like this. And we'll work through the political system. And then the year after that, ETA decided to dissolve their own organization. It was the end of it. And they would politically work within the society. The Basque Parliament then created a Department of Peace, put the man that spearheaded this ahead of the Department of Peace in the Basque Parliament. And this is the kind of thinking. They're just right there with the thought, the vision, and the execution of that vision immediately. There isn't a bureaucracy that says, well, we need to study this for 5 years. We need to consultants. None of that. They just do it. And that's something that has been profound in my learning about them, is they don't have these machinations over what's possible and what isn't possible. They never think about impossibility. And that's something that's interesting to me, because they're not pie in the sky, in fairy tales. They're very practical people, and yet they don't deal with things being impossible. And that has impressed me greatly. To them, if you get an idea, then it's possible to get it in reality. And I've seen that over and over again with what they've been able to manifest there. And this peace department is one of those things. To see it go from where it was when I first went there to where it is today, you would never know that ETA had existed at all. It's just a completely different reality. And this, I first went there in 2008. So this is not that long ago that all this has happened. And the other thing about the Mondragon Co-op, because the cooperatives have also affected the society. Today, the Mondragon cooperatives may be 100 different businesses, but there are also another 1,000 or so cooperatives, worker-owned businesses in the Basque region. So it's a big movement. It's a big part of the culture. There are independent businesses even in Mondragon. They're usually small, family kind of businesses with a few employees, not a lot. Nothing is large if it's privately owned. But I think the model for me that I have wanted to educate people about, learn about, is to say this is not impossible. This is happening somewhere on the planet, and it is growing in a sustainable way. And that it's possible to happen anywhere. I know there are people who say, oh, the Basque region, they're more cooperative, so it couldn't happen here, but it could happen there. And when I've told that to people there, they say, no, we're just normal people. And I thought, yeah, they're normal people, but we're a different kind of normal here. They don't revere the individuation that we do. They're not so individually minded. And they have a concept that we don't have in the American culture, and that is the concept of enough. They're okay with a certain level of income, livelihood. They don't need yachts and private planes and helicopters and all kinds of luxury vacations. They don't need all this. And that is a different mindset. How we get our mindset from what we've been trained in to that mindset, I'm not sure how that works. I see it happening in our culture in small pockets, but I think we can learn a lot from the people at Mondragon and what they have been able to create, and not only create, but sustain and continue to evolve. That's what has been interesting to me, is to watch the evolution at Mondragon. It's never the same place. And, there are things that are constant, but there's always movement. And they never think they've got all the answers. So that's one of their reticence about being out in the world, is they're still learning. And that's part of their journey, is the continual learning, the continual improvement. So I know when I came back from the first trip in 2008, I was just waxing poetic how wonderful this place is. It's kind of like a utopia. And people say, oh, you go back a few more times and, you'll see it differently. Well, now I've been there 13 times and I don't see it differently. It's incredible. It's really a model I think not only can we learn from, we should emulate and try to bring a lot of these ideas into our own culture. I think, there are worker-owned businesses in our county. The Arizmendi Bakery in Petaluma is worker-owned. It began in 1974 or 5, so it's 50 years old. And it's still going. I think they have like 115, 16 worker owners. A good portion of them are Latino, and they make a really good living. And they have health insurance, they have dental insurance, they have 4 to 6 weeks paid vacation. It's just like in Mondragon. So that is here, but it doesn't get any press. Also, the Arizmendi bakeries that are in the Bay Area. I think there are 5 of them, 2 in San Francisco, Berkeley, Emeryville. So those work on the same model. It's just we're in a much bigger society and we don't have it contained in a small area. So it's possible, we see it in our own culture, and we see the difficulty in our culture to create something like this. I don't want to go on too long because I want to be able to take questions from you, and I actually don't know how long this goes on, but there are a few points I really want to make about the area and about the culture itself and what they've been able to achieve. I think if any of you want to go there, we are going back in September, and I did bring flyers of that and some of our upcoming events at Praxis. But spending a week there has a profound effect on everyone who's gone, because you not only hear about it, you feel it. You feel what's different. And that, I guess that impetus for that, feeling it, knowing it, and then coming back. I always come back refreshed and ready to do the next thing, but I also realize it's an uphill battle, especially with the government we've got right now. We're up against so much, I don't even want to go there. But this is what gives me hope, seeing what can be accomplished with the right vision, the right intentionality to actually make it work, to make it happen. And let me give you just a sketch of what they do comprise today. So one worker-owned business in 1956. Then in 1959, Arizmendi said, we've got to start a bank. We need our own bank if we're going to be growing cooperative businesses. So he couldn't get anyone who he was working with in the cooperatives to agree with him. Nobody knew about banking, and they said, we're not going to sign on anything to be bankers. And so he forged their signatures to create the bank. He went to Madrid, forged their signatures, and got the charter for a bank. Today, that bank has 380 branches all over Spain. So it's huge, and it's worker-owned. And they also have a university system. There are 3 different universities We will have our seminar in one of the universities in a town called Oñati, which is near Mondragon. Beautiful campus, it's new. And they have a cooking school, which they started about 12, 13 years ago. And it's a 4-year university program in culinary arts. And apparently it's famous all over the world for people who are into that. They get chefs from really famous chefs to teach there. So those are part of the things they do. They have, I think most of the young children go to Montessori schools. That's the system that they use there. Let's see, what are some of the other? They have medical supply companies. A lot of it's industrial, but of course some of it has evolved. And to see how the government has changed also, and how it relates to the cooperative culture, it's a seamless culture in a way. So I think rather than go on too much more now, I would like to take questions from people or comments or whatever you would like to do.
You have another 10 minutes if you'd like.
Okay,
before we
okay,
break
great.
in.
Okay, I wasn't sure what I had. Let me get some water. Yeah, sometimes talking makes my mouth dry. So some of these core principles that I was mentioning before, the social transformation, one of the ways that they've worked on this, there's now an organization that didn't exist when we first went there in Bilbao, that their specific work as an NGO is social transformation. So they work sometimes in Spain, in the Basque region, but they also go to other countries. They go to third world countries, help people set up cooperatives, how it works. And one of the things they did in the Basque region, because there was a change in jobs were being diminished in the industrial sector in this one town, and they were actually becoming much greener in the kind of industry that they wanted to do. They wanted to get away from anything that was using fossil fuels or using environmentally dangerous products. So in doing that, it meant several people were losing their jobs. So they came in, this NGO came in and said, okay, we are going to have meetings with the stakeholders of people losing their jobs, the people who will be getting new jobs, and the community at large. And so they had these meetings to figure out how can everybody come out of this ahead? That's the kind of work they do. How can everybody come out ahead? Not, okay, you're losing your job, we've got new green jobs and you're not skilled for that, so you're not going to have a job anymore. No, they figure out how all this will work. And that is another model I think we can get a lot from. Another point that we learned about, because one of their core principles is intercooperation, which means all the cooperatives work together to help each other. And if one is having trouble, another one will help. Well, a very interesting thing happened in 2013. One Fagor domestic appliances, not the industrial, which I mentioned earlier, but Fagor industrial appliances went bankrupt. This is the first time this had happened at the Mondragon cooperatives. Over 2,000 people, jobs were affected. So now the intercooperation principle was really being put to the test. How were they going to deal with over 2,000 people without jobs? So here's how they did it. They gave early retirement to some people with full pensions. They relocated some of the workers into other businesses who had the skills that could relocate quickly. They did that into the other businesses. Then for those that didn't have the skills then for other jobs, they had a retraining for them for free. And they had 80% of their salary for up to 2 years if they couldn't get a job in that amount of time. So it gave them enough time to really get the skills and get another job. This is how intercooperation was put to the test. It wasn't like it was one of the small businesses that went bankrupt. It was one of the larger ones. So within, it was like 1.5 years, less than 2 years, everyone had been placed. No one was without a job or they were retired on full pension. So that was something that I think put the pedal to the metal or the metal to the pedal, whatever it is, proved that they step up to the values they have. The core principles are really what guide them. They don't make excuses, oh, well, this is too big an issue. We can't use that principle now. It's not that. It's, okay, how do we make use of that principle in this challenging time? And then they do it. There was a woman earlier who founded a women's organization because there were very few women in the government there. And she thought, we need more women in positions of leadership in the government. So she founded an organization with a few other people. And at that time, I think women in government, it was a really small number. It was, I don't know, less than 10%. It was very small. So they got to work in the 80s. This started in the 80s. Today, the women in parliament, it's over 54%. So it worked. And that's what I mean when I say that they get a vision, they get a plan, and they don't say, well, we can't do this. This is impossible, or it's going to be too challenging. They just make these things work. I know we have bureaucracies here that make it really hard to get things done. And that's something we probably need to work on as a culture. But they do manage to do things quickly and effectively. And, you know, because of the amount of time I've been there between 2008 and 2024, the changes and the way they incorporate things and the new NGOs that are developed and the way they work in the society, it's all mushroomed in that amount of time. And it's amazing to me to see that, because I look at what's happened in my country between 2008 and today. Well, we had that whole financial destruction in 2008. In fact, we were in Mondragon in October 2008 when all that hit the fan. And a few of the people in our group said, well, can we just stay here? We don't want to go back to that. So the banks got bailed out here, but not the people. People lost homes, people lost income. A lot changed because of 2008, and then it wasn't dealt with in a way that helped the people. And what I see there is their motto is people before profit, always. They'll say we need profit to survive, but people come first. And it's clear in everything they do that people before profit is the motto. And I think we can't underestimate the role that Father Arizmendi Arrieta had on the whole plan for this, because his vision was, you know, it wouldn't look practical at the time because you had this huge unemployment, but it became super practical with the way he laid the foundation for it. That even when he was gone, as of 79, it still grew. It still kept with the original vision and growing that I guess, growing the vision, it's evolving the vision so that it really has changed the society significantly. To go there now and realize that this was probably such an impoverished area in the 40s and 50s that now you would never know that happened. The city of Bilbao, which was a very highly industrial city, their river was completely polluted. Someone who came on our first trip said, I don't want to go to Bilbao. It's a filthy town. River's polluted. It's just awful. And I said, well, that's not what I'm seeing. And though they cleaned up the river, and the parliament there decided we need to do something to lift the city up so this becomes a really a beautiful city, not just an industrial, dirty, polluted city. So I think the president then contacted Frank Gehry. Would he build a museum in Bilbao? So the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao got built there, and it became a symbol of the transformation that city was going to go through. And it's a beautiful city today. I know it wasn't before I went there because I've heard about it and I've seen pictures, but it's a beautiful city today. And the river was completely cleaned up. It's a lovely river with a beautiful walkway and then a separate bicycle pathway that goes all along the river and ends at the Guggenheim Museum, which is a beautiful museum. And it was partially built by a Mondragon construction company. So they're involved in a lot of the things through the whole society, the whole Basque region. And I just want to mention, besides Mondragon, there are a lot of cooperatives in Catalonia, in Valencia, in Barcelona. There's some in southern Spain and Andalusia. In fact, if there is enough interest, we might go to Seville after the conference, because there's a town about an hour's drive from Seville called Marina Leda, and they call themselves a communist town. And if you look at their city hall, there's a big mural of Che Guevara on the wall outside. And it was founded by the guy who's been mayor ever since in the 1970s. And they were petitioning the Andalusian government for 1,200 hectares of land to grow food, because they were a really poor area. And Andalusia is the poorest area of Spain. So they petitioned the government, were getting nowhere. It was owned by some lord or whoever they are, some old duke who was doing nothing with the land. It was just laying fallow. Finally, after about 8 years, the government either purchased the land and they ended up giving it to the people in Marina Leda. And they created a agricultural paradise, in a sense. They grow everything, all kinds of food. They have olive trees. They make olive oil. They sell it all over Spain. One of their biggest customers is the Araski supermarket, which is all over Spain, and it's worker-owned. It's one of the Mondragon cooperatives. And they have branches, well, I think they acquired it, and the first group they converted to worker ownership in the Basque region, and then they've converted the whole complex of these supermarkets into worker-owned. So they had a buyer almost right away. But it's been incredible what they've been able to do in a short amount of time too, because everybody has a job in Marina Leda. I don't think anyone has to work full time because they all have jobs. They all have housing. They pay $15 a month for their housing. They help each other build houses. This is part of what they do. So I think it's a fascinating model also that is complementary to Mondragon. Mondragon isn't that extreme, but I think they're both interesting models to learn from. So with that, I think I've given an overview. I know I've missed things because there's so much to talk about with Mondragon, but I don't want to go on and on and on. And I want to find out what part of this you might be most interested in exploring.
Great. We're going to pass the microphone around. So if you'll wait for us, we will get to you and we'll kind of give you a heads up of where they are.
Great.
Here's our first question.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. How diverse is the population in terms of ethnicity, religion? I know they were all poor to start with, but culturally, how diverse is it?
Not terribly diverse. I mean, it's mostly Basque people, but they do have immigrants into the region, both from other parts of Spain. People have moved there because it's better life. And also, I met people from Mexico who were working at the Mondragon cooperatives that immigrated there. But also in the town of Mondragon, there are Muslims from Pakistan. I don't know how they got there, but they have one of the families has the best kebab place in the area. So there's a mix. I mean, I think the immigration or the people who come into the area, it's a small number. It's a realistic number. They can be in the society without it being a problem. There's no discrimination that I have ever seen. So I would say it's primarily Basque, but there are these other elements coming in, and there have been for a while.
Yes.
Oh.
Thank you for your presentation. It gives me a little hope. I wanted to mention that the closest thing that I have found in this country is the employee-owned companies that are ESOPs, Employee Stock Ownership Plan. And my company did that. I noticed a dramatic change in employee behavior when that happened. And typically, employee stock ownership plans are 15% more profitable. You have less turnover. The job satisfaction is really excellent. Even though I sold the company 100% to my employees, there's someone who's been there for as long as I started the company. He's still there and doing very effective work. So I just wanted to say there are small models here. And of course, the right-wing part of government is always trying to eliminate them.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a way to really have capitalism work, but with a social conscience and a much better performance.
Yes, ESOPs are another form of cooperative. It's worker employee stock ownership, but they can own more than one share. It's a different model. The only danger I would see is it could be bought, whereas a modern type of worker ownership could not be bought. So there are advantages and disadvantages, but I'd certainly much prefer to see an ESOP than a regular company that's with a CEO making 400 times what the average worker makes. Yes, you were.
Two questions. One is the 80,000 people that are part of the cooperative, do they all live in that one area? And my second question, can people buy in? Or if it's one vote per person, is it inherited? Can your children have that vote?
No, it's not inherited and you can't buy it. You only get the share if you become a worker. You get hired for a job. You become a worker owner. There is a 18-month probationary period where you get the job and they see if you work out and it works out for you, it works out for them, then you're a permanent worker owner member. I forgot the first part of your question. Oh, 80. No, they don't all live there. I would say the majority who work in the Mondragon cooperatives probably live in Mondragon, but they're cooperatives throughout the Basque region and they would live in the other regions where they are.
So thank you so much for your presentation. I just want to make one comment. I wonder whether you heard about Homeboy Industries in LA that was started by a Jesuit priest.
Yes.
And it works with gang members, the same idea of teaching them, giving them jobs. And, you know, his motto is that nothing stops a bullet like a job does. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing is I was wondering whether they have any mechanism within the system that stops the human ego and the greed and people's natural inclination to climb over each other and exploit each other, because throughout human history we have had wonderful ideologies like Christianity, communism, Buddhism, and somehow they all managed to go haywire. So what is the mechanism that they have to control that urge?
Yeah, it just reminded me, I think Aldous Huxley had a drug for that. What is different about their culture? This is a question I continually have. Why do they not have the kind of impetus toward wanting more all the time, needing more, wanting more, never satisfied? They're satisfied. What is it in their culture? And their culture supports being satisfied. Ours does not. Ours is a constant bombardment of you need this, you need that. To be happy, you have to have this, you have to be able to do that. It's a constant barrage we're getting. TV, news, social media, all of it. And you know, it's much worse now than when you and I were young. We didn't have this thing going on all the time, and we didn't have cheap stuff coming into our culture so you could keep buying and throwing away. I mean, there weren't cheap clothes like there are now. You know, people just buy stuff, throw it away, get new stuff, throw it away. It's a constant turnover. We didn't have that when we were young. Something changed between when we were kids to where things are now. It's continually moved rightward, and it's continually become more individually focused. How do we undo that? I don't think there is a magic pill, but this is a question I have too. How do we start undoing that? I see part of it happening in the society. I've been really heartened by seeing the rallies that AOC and Bernie are doing around the country and what they're pulling out of the society by their values. And they're speaking their values very clearly. No double talk, no nonsense. It's just what you hear is what you get from them. And that's so refreshing in our society that I think it can help turn the way people see things. We need more of that, a lot more of it. We need examples. We need better examples in our educational system than we have. There's so much competition. I mean, when the people have to get in the best schools and they have to get the best grades, and all this constant need to be somebody you're not, or to become somebody like someone else. We're not satisfied with enough on so many levels that I think that's part of the problem, is getting back to what will really be satisfactory. What are the needs, not what are the greeds. It's a hard change, I think, because we've gradually moved into this and we weren't there 50 years ago.
Thank you very much for your talk today. It's been very interesting. In 1948, Israel began, and the kibbutzim started as an agricultural co-op because they were socialist, communist, whatever they were. It never gravitated toward the industrial part of the community. And I think even the kibbutz idea is dying as people are moving off farms to city. Do you have any comparisons with their model and a kibbutz?
Are you asking if there was a connection between them? I don't think so. I think the main person that Arizmendi learned from was Robert Owen in England, who was a person who had written a lot about cooperatives, and I think actually created a cooperative culture. And I can't remember where it is in England, but that's who Arizmendi was, who he really learned from, I think, the ideas. I don't think he ever met him, but he read his work. Arizmendi was a highly educated person, and he had read a lot about these kinds of societies and then was able to, fortunately, put it into praxis. But he was doing this actually before those got off the ground. So yeah, he had a different, yes.
One example we have here in Santa Rosa is Oliver's Market,
Mm.
which was donated. I think it was Albertsons was going to buy it for something $127 million. And Stephen said, "No, we're going to donate it to our employees and give it to them," which they did. So it's all employer owned now.
So is this one worker, one vote type of thing, or is it ESOP, or do you know?
ESOP.
ESOP? And they didn't have to buy it? It was just given to them? That's incredible.
Yes. You know, I saw one of those Bernie and AOC
Mhm.
thing, you know, on the TV, and I saw how many people were there. So I got curious, and I
Put this
looked
up to your,
and so I got curious, and I just Googled what was the average show for one of show how many people showed up for a typical Trump rally. It was about 5,700. And the one I was watching for them had 15,000 people. They are drawing big crowds.
yeah, he was talking about AOC and Bernie, the kinds of crowds they're getting for the rallies they're doing. And I think in Colorado, they got 34,000 people showed up.
Wow.
In Arizona, and remember, they're going to kind of mega areas. In Arizona, both in Tempe and in Tucson, they got, I'm trying to think how many they got. Tempe was 12,000 or something. It was more in Tucson. So they're getting huge turnouts. There are people starving for this kind of thing that we're talking about today, and they just don't know where to get it, where to find it. So I think those rallies are helping get people realize, you know, we don't have to be stuck in this morass that we're in. We can do something better. Was there someone else?
Yes, I just had one more. I actually had a question.
Okay, and put your mouth right up to the.
Is Spain still a Catholic country or a religious country?
I don't think so. I mean, I think maybe their Catholicism is more like a lot of people's Judaism. It's cultural more than it's religious. In the Basque region, you know, they have their churches, and I think when we still went there, there were two of the original members from the Fagor 5-person cooperative that began in 1956. They were still alive, and one of them went to Mass every single morning. And we saw him when we'd be on our way to somewhere else. We'd see him going into the church. But that was that generation. This generation, no, they're not really religious.
Georgia, since you live in Sonoma
Hi.
and you created this important institute there called Praxis Peace Institute that gives talks and Zoom lectures. And I thought you might want to say something about it because
Oh.
we're so close to Sonoma and you do have events there.
Yeah, she asked me to say something.
Oh dear, I thought it was loud.
I can do it. She asked me to say something about Praxis Peace Institute, which I began 25 years ago this year. And I didn't plan to start an organization, but I did want to do a conference that asked this question: why does humanity continue to cycle the same wars over again? Why don't we learn the lessons of history? I wanted to put that conference on, and I did through another organization. And when it was over, we realized, the inquiry is just beginning. Maybe we need to start an organization. So that's how Praxis got born. And originally, it was just to do conferences every once in a while. But then it got into more lectures and conversations. And one of my mentors, who passed away last week, Sam Keene, probably many of you know him or know of him. He was involved with the creation of Praxis from the beginning, really kind of a mentor to me. I'd bring pages of my vision and he'd say, oh, you got to change this, you got to change that. And it's funny because I went to Angeles Arian at the same time. I said, what do you think? She said, oh, this looks wonderful. And Sam tore it apart. And of course, what I needed was both. I needed encouragement from her, and I needed to be torn apart so something really good could come out of it. But he was kind of a mentor for me all this time, and he wrote an incredible book called Faces of the Enemy. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It became our, I won't use the word Bible, but it became a go-to book for understanding how enemies are created, how wars are perpetuated. And eventually we got to the place where, okay, what are the different streams that feed into war? And for me, the big one was economic. There are people making too much money off of wars. And when we did the economics of peace, that was one of the things that we focused on in that conference, which took place in Sonoma in 2009. So Praxis now, we do a lot of programs on Zoom and a few live ones. We just had Richard Heinberg in Sonoma last week, and I interviewed somebody on Zoom Friday, the editor of Current Affairs magazine, a young guy, just brilliant young guy, who co-wrote a book with Noam Chomsky. So we were talking about that. So we do things like that. It's educational, and we have discussions once a month on Zoom so people can talk about what's interesting to them or what they want to bounce off of other people or what their frustrations are. So we do things like that. And we will do another seminar in Mondragon in September. And I do have flyers, which I will maybe put out on the back table so people can pick them up if they want.
Yes, I had a question. The jobs there at the cooperative seem like they must be ideal. There must be a long list of applicants. How do they go about selecting who gets a job in a cooperative?
How they sort out who gets a job? Is that what
I'm wondering about the selection process.
well, at this point, it's if there's a job opening, one can apply for it who's outside the system. Or if they have an idea, they might go to Mondragon and say, I think this would be a really good business. Are you interested? And there might be people who would come together and then make that happen. Wouldn't be an individual project, but it could be begun by an individual. But usually it's that there's an opening at this point. And then there's that 18-month probationary period where you see if it's a fit from both sides. And if it is, the person becomes a permanent worker owner and they're really set up for life. And if it doesn't, they go do something else. But that probationary period is safety on both sides.
So I was wondering about the medical care and how that's organized.
Well, they have their own insurance company. It's called Lagoon Auto. And it's medical insurance, it's pensions, it's all of those types of insurance. They cover people's medical expenses, but they have two medical insurances. They have the Basque, the Mondragon insurance, and they have the Spanish insurance. So they have both. They're very well protected. And they have state-of-the-art hospitals. I mean, there's one that's half a block away from the hotel where we stay. And one person in our group one time had to go there. It was kind of a false alarm, but he saw what the hospital looked like, and he said, this place is state-of-the-art. It's extraordinary. I've not been in it, but I believe him. So they're very cutting edge on pretty much everything. They were the first companies in Spain to make computer chips. They've been kind of on the leading edge of a lot of industrial advancements. Yes.
If someone comes and wants to start a business that's a different model, is that allowed?
What do you mean by a different model?
Well, just non-cooperative.
No,
Non,
no.
so all of the businesses
All of
in
these are
this
worker-owned.
region are worker-owned.
Yeah. Everything's worker-owned. One worker, one vote.
Are the hospitals also part of the co-op?
Yes. Oh, although, well, no.
Worker
No,
owned?
the insurance that covers the hospitals it's the co-op, not the hospital.
Okay, and we have time for one more question. Oh, I see up in the front. Here you go.
You had mentioned the 10 core principles.
Mm-hmm.
You highlighted that social was the
Oh,
the
you're going to ask me
focus.
what they all are, and I haven't
And I
memorized them.
hate to put you on the spot.
That's okay.
Sorry
I've got 'em
about
here.
that. I can wait.
Here they are.
You
Okay,
got them.
yeah.
Thank you.
Education's in the center, and it's like a circle. And the first circle around education is sovereignty of labor. Let's see, I don't have my glasses on. So wage solidarity, which we mentioned before, 1 to 6 to the CEO. And women and men, by the way, have always received the same salary for the same work. It was never different. Yeah. That was a core principle. In fact, Arizmendi, there's a little book of all his sayings, and one of them, he says, you can tell how evolved a society is by the role of women in the society. That was in the 40s. So intercooperation, I mentioned, universal nature. Some of these I'm having a hard time. Open admission. That means anyone could come in if they, the right, they wouldn't discriminate is what that means. Let's see. Well, yeah, participatory democracy in the process. Some of these are long. Instrumental and this is important. The instrumental and subordinated nature of capital. This is where people before profit. The subordinated nature of capital, really important. And if you want to see these and write them down, I've got them with me. They're also on the Praxis website. If you go to the page on Mondragon, it's big on the screen.
Well, thank you so much. I think I can help you by putting some of your flyers in the back because I'm
Yeah, I'm
sure
gonna
there's
put
going to
flyers
be
on the
people
back.
who want to talk to you.